I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today wherever it is that you're listening and whenever it is that you might be listening in. Today's episode is sponsored by my dear friend, Christy Allen. Christy has supported me through Patreon for a really long time, almost a year now. And so I'm really grateful to Christy for not just her financial support, but she's just always filled with an encouraging word. She's been interviewed on this podcast a couple of times. I get to see her every year at the Run the Bluegrass and have been fortunate in the past year to see her at couple of different places in addition to that. So she is a dear friend, a great supporter. And if you are interested in learning more about sponsoring this podcast and the entire 21047.com mission, you can go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47.com, click on the Support Me tab, and then go from there and learn a little bit more about Patreon. Patreon is just a platform where folks can support folks like me who are just trying to make a difference or just get a message out there through writing, podcasting, videos, what have you. Lots of different things going on that people get supported for. But if you want to support me in this 21047.com effort, you can, like I said, go to the Support Me tab on my website and go check out Patreon. So I'm really grateful for all the Patreon supporters. The financial support allows me to do some extra things each month that I probably wouldn't otherwise have the time to do. And so that makes me just really grateful. So thank you all. Today's episode, I'm really excited about this one. So I don't know, it's been 3-4 months ago maybe when I first was introduced to Jenny Baker. Actually, it was Harvey Lewis did a series around Thanksgiving, I guess it was, where for a week he highlighted different people who were followed sort of his vegetarian vegan diet, I think was a real centerpiece to these folks. But then all of them were big runners as well. And so Jenny Baker was one of those folks who was featured. And once I read her story, really what caught my eye about her story was that she lived in Ohio at one point. I grew up in Ohio. And she had started this big running group at Crossroads Church there. And I think in the article that Harvey had shared, that running group reached like 1,200 people, which that caught my eye. I'm pretty active in our church. And so I was just intrigued by this idea, this possibility of a large running group like that. And then she was also working on a book that has since been released and published. And so I have this writing hobby. I love to write. And so all of it is like, I think I need to talk with Jenny Baker. And boy, she just turned out to be one fascinating interview. So we spent a lot of time talking about her book. We definitely talked about the Crossroads Church initiative, which was wonderful. We talked about her love for God. We definitely share a strong Christian faith, so we had that connection there. And then one of the things that was briefly mentioned, and it's ironic now that as I go on and tell you this story, that it turned out to be one of the bigger pieces of our conversation, but Jenny is the race director of the Georgia Jewel Ultra Marathon. It's run in northern Georgia there. So her and her husband Franklin are co-race directors. You'll hear how that came about, sort of a fascinating way, as you'll hear in this interview. But they direct this race, and it's a 100-mile race. There's a 50-mile version, 35 and 17, I believe. So there are 4 distances all the way up to 100. And my friend Nicole and I have run several races together this year she joined me in Houston, and then we ended up at Little Rock at the same time. And then I've shared on my podcast our recent Run the Bluegrass half marathon. And we were joking at one point about some just crazy races, including 7 marathons in 7 days and just some different crazy runners do. They start joking about these crazy ideas. And I had interviewed a couple of guys lately who had talked about some dare great initiatives, really looking to press their limits, check their limits, see how far they could go. So all of that kind of fueled these joking conversations about what kind of crazy running adventure we could get into. And then somehow Little Rock, that turned to Jenny Baker, the Georgia Jewel. And then the next thing I knew, we were registered and signed up to run. Both of us will be running our first ultra marathons the end of September at the Georgia Jewel, 35 miles. And, I just think it's really Jenny Baker. Just that conversation I had with her, I was just taken by her spirit, by her fire. I've listened to a couple of podcasts actually where she was interviewed about the Georgia Jewel, and she just pours all of her energy into that. It's, it's like you listen to her and you just sucked into, all of a sudden you're running an ultra marathon. So I could not wait to get her back on and talk about this. She and I are going to do, this will be the first interview of a series leading up to that September race. So we'll do some cool things along the way to build up to that my first ultra marathon, first trail race, first run up a mountain, just going to be all sorts of firsts there. And so I'm really excited that this is going to be in partnership with Jenny Baker. Once you listen to this interview, you'll know why I'm so excited about that. She just is energy at its highest. She's just beauty at its best. She's got this deep faith that I connect with. I just think it's going to be the perfect scenario for the best setting for my first ultra marathon. So I am going to get you over to my interview with Jenny Baker, just so you know how important it was for me to do this interview. The only time we really could connect, and I really wanted to get this thing out there this week, the only time we could connect was at 9:00 at night. I'm never up at 9:00 at night. I don't do anything at 9:00 at night, let alone podcast interviews, but it just so happened that was the best time for both of us to do that. So it was a great conversation. I loved it. This is going to be part one of several. So let me get you over to my interview with Jenny Baker. So I want to welcome Jenny Baker back to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Jenny.
Hey, it's so good to be back. Thanks for having me back. And I am really excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so a little background. And, so I got to tell you that I went back and listened to our last podcast interview because for the life of me, I couldn't quite figure out where this idea got put in my mind and in my heart that I wanted to run the Georgia Jewel. And so I thought, well, she must have said something in that podcast. And I went back and listened to it, and really we talked about your book, we talked about Crossroads Church, we talked about eating, we talked about a lot of great stuff, but we barely mentioned Georgia Jewel. But me, a bunch of friends and I, we ran the Little Rock Marathon back in March. And during that marathon, my friend Nicole and I joked a lot about some of these crazy races. We talked about running 7 marathons in 7 days. We talked about these people that do 52 marathons in a year. And we joked about all these crazy races that we could run. But then you became really a talk in Little Rock because you had called me very kindly. You called me before the Little Rock Marathon, made sure that I was feeling confident, made sure that I was eating well, made sure I had a good pace down. I really, in all sincerity, appreciated that call. But one thing you said was that we talked about the hills, and you said that when I got to the hills, they would be very welcoming. And that became a real running joke for the weekend. to the point where I was running the marathon and my friend Nicole is much faster, so she was way up ahead. And so she was like sending text messages that these hills are, run the bluegrass on steroids. These hills are huge. And I'm like, are they welcoming? Are these hills welcoming? And so at some point then you became this talk, and then all these crazy races turned to the Georgia Jewel and the 35-mile version of that. And at some point, I think we kind of informally, my friend Nicole and I informally agreed to run that race until about 3 weeks ago. I guess she just got a little worried that I would understand the magnitude of what we were joking about. And she sent me an email that showed that she had officially registered for this thing. And so I followed suit, and here we are. Both of us have never run a trail race in our life, have never run anything longer than a marathon in our life, and we are headed to the Georgia Jewel. So, you and your husband Franklin are the race directors of the Georgia Jewel, and the first thing I'd love to know is, how did that even come to be? How did you two end up becoming this husband-wife team directors of the Georgia Jewel?
So God has a funny way, as you know, of opening doors and kind of pushing you through them. And so kind of like how you decided to sign up for the Georgia Jewel, we were trail runners and had moved to Chattanooga to be part of the outdoor community. And we really felt like this is where God was calling us to invest in the community and to give back. And so Franklin found this race online. It was called the Georgia Jewel. It was in Dalton, Georgia, which is 30 minutes from Chattanooga. And he said, "Hey, can I go run this race?" I said, "Sure." So I met him at the finish line, and the race director was talking about not being around next year, but moving. And I said, "Well, I can help with the race if you'd like," and, looking for a way to volunteer. And so she said, great. She got my information. And a couple of weeks later, I had mentioned to Franklin, hey, the race director, I think, is moving. And I told her I would help her with the race next year. And so a few weeks later, she called and said, I'm moving to Israel and I'm giving you the race. And I said, wonderful. And Franklin about choked me. And so, like most things, we jumped into this world of race directing, not just, a half marathon or a marathon, but directing a 100-miler, a 50-miler, and a 35-mile race in the middle of Georgia on the Pinhoti Trail. And we had no experience, and all she gave us to start with was like a couple of gas cans and some Christmas lights, and said, you can do it. So that's how we got into directing the Georgia Jewel.
Oh. Yeah, it does feel real similar. I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat. So, the first thing I really have to ask, because again, neither of us to this point, although we're both fairly committed in the next week or so to go. I mean, I took my wife and the boys. We actually went hiking last weekend, and we've always been outdoorsy folks. I've hiked on trails, but this idea of running a 35-mile race on a trail, what exactly am I going to encounter in this 35-mile portion of the Georgia Jewel? I'm clueless. I've never seen it. What exactly am I going to be running when I get there? Right.
So I'm sure you're familiar with Peter Pan. Most of us grew up, that was our generation, was Peter Pan. And I remember the first time Franklin and I went and ran on trails. We were road runners and triathletes, and we had heard about these people that would go out in the woods and run through the woods. And so there were some trails close to where we lived, and Franklin said, let's go, run these trails. My dad runs trail races. Let's go see what the hype is about. And I remember running through Idlewild, Kentucky, this trail system, feeling like a lost boy in Peter Pan. Truly, for the first time, like, in running, feeling free and alive, and it was play. It wasn't transactional, a transactional experience where I'm going to do a 6-mile road run. Here's my route. I, map my route through the neighborhood. I'm trying to cross traffic, thinking about traffic lights, just hitting the pavement over and over. I was actually playing in the woods. And so you are going to have 35 miles of playing in the woods. You are going to feel like a kid again. You're going to run through creeks. You're going to run through caves. You're going to climb up a rope at one point in one of the sections. Actually, you'll climb down the rope in one of the sections. Think about when you were a kid and you would just go play outside all day. That's what you're going to experience in the 35 miles. Climbing mountains, running on ridge tops of a mountain where you can see out into the valley and see all of northern Georgia mountains. It is a spectacular experience, and I think one that your spirit will really connect with in creation and in the beauty of all of it. So it'll be like play. You'll be playing for 35 miles.
My buddy Bill Manning is listening to this. Well, he will at some point. He'll listen to this and he'll just be grinning ear to ear because he's always telling me, Keith, because I sort of have a reputation that I'm not a big smiler when I run. I mean, I don't know that there's ever been a race photo recorded with me smiling. And Bill's always telling me, Keith, you got to learn to run like a kid on the playground. You just got to have this smile about you. And so it's kind of a running joke. And to your point, the one thing I have been doing about trail running is doing a lot of reading. And almost everybody that I read who's into the trail running talks about this spiritual connection. I'm not sure I've read one person. Now, they don't all share the same faith that I do, but all of them speak to this spiritual sort of connection of and I think that's that nature piece. Now, I do have to press just a little bit. So when you talk about climbing mountains, right, for me, it's like, well, how big is the mountain? So how tall am I going to have to climb?
It's going to be the tallest mountain you feel like you have ever climbed in your life. And I'm just going to tell you that in the moment, it's going to feel not possible. And here's the thing I love about trail running, and this is why I fit and identify more with the trail community than I necessarily do the road running. And, I love road running because there are times for it. I can get in miles a lot quicker than if I'm on the trails. But I love trails because you do not run any uphill. Like when you get into a train of runners on the single track, you will all be running and you'll be in a nice flow, and then you'll all get to this uphill, and just instinctively, as your body momentum slows down, you'll just walk up the hill and be like, oh, we walk hills. This is great. I love this. And it is a just much different rhythm than road running is. There's also different expectations. So because it's so much more experiential, you are engaging not just when you're on the road, it is a very monotonous motion, in which I think also moves to your mind. There's a lot of mental monotony for me in marathons and road running, but when you're trail running, your whole being is engaged because your body is moving kinetically in different motions, but then also your mind is able to wander because the scenery is so different, so breathtaking. But you asked me about the mountain. So what I will tell you is there is a climb up Johns Mountain. You can look it up. It's on the Pinhoti Trail and Cowan Falls. So that's a pretty big climb. But just as soon as you get to the top, there is this aid station. And the aid station is run by one of our amazing running groups here in Chattanooga. It's called the Scenic City Trail Runners. And they always pick Johns Mountain to be up on the top of. And they have themes. So last year it was superheroes. And so they all dress up as superheroes. And when you come into that aid stations in trail running are totally different than aid stations in road races. When you're running a marathon, they have these long tables they've put together with cups of water and Gatorade, and they're handing them to you, and you drink them, and you throw them down, and you keep moving. Aid stations and trail races are like big parties at people's houses. So you've got these spreads of brownies and candy, and that's why trail running also is awesome, because you can eat a lot of food, and it's burritos and sweet potato pies. And so you'll be met at the top of Johns Mountain by these amazing people who will take off your hydration pack, which we will talk about. If you have not bought one, you'll need to buy one. They will take off your pack. They will refill it for you. They will give you M&Ms, Skittles, Snickers, whatever you want, and they'll ask you how you are, and you'll have a conversation with them. And it will be this amazing, refreshing few minutes of hanging out at somebody's party tent before you get to go back down the mountain. So the mountain will feel quite large, but there will be a reward at the top, and when you look back on it, you'll go, that wasn't really the biggest mountain I've ever climbed.
I love it. I really do. And I think really, we've landed here because in Little Rock we started this joke about challenging ourselves. One of the guys that I had interviewed prior to Little Rock was this guy who he had run a marathon on 7 different continents and 52 states in 1 year. And he went by the Eternal Endurance, a great Christian man, had a lot of faith. And I asked him why he kept doing that. Why do you keep pushing yourself? And he said, because I haven't found my limit yet. And I believe with God in my life, I'm not going to find it. He said, so I just keep daring greatly. When we keep pushing ourselves and we work with God and accomplish something like that, it's humbling, and it also creates so much gratitude and just, joy. So I very much relate to what he says about he hadn't found his limit yet. I love that. I think really this Dare Greatly, Georgia Joel, I think we were drawn to it for 2 reasons. Number one, just this whole idea of ultra running and mountains, 35 miles. It's something greater than either of us have ever done. And so when we think Dare Greatly, just the physical piece of it. But then you too, with that, the conversation you and I had, the spiritual side of you comes out in real big, powerful ways. And I think that was a real draw. So I think this is a perfect sort of setting for us to go Dare Greatly. And I think we're both really looking forward to it. So tell me this, you've got rookies coming, and we're coming right off of road racing. What does a rookie need to know just in terms of some of the preparation? And I'm not talking training. We can talk about that on down the road. But in terms of just some first steps and being prepared to transition from running on the road to running on the trail, what should we know? A couple of things. I'll start with the gear. You want to wear longer shorts, taller socks, and trail shoes are different than road shoes, and so you want to get a good pair of trail shoes. They are typically more stable. A lot of them will come with rock plates in the forefoot of the shoe so that when you hit roots or rocks, it's not destroying the bottoms of your feet. And you'll want tall socks because dirt will find its way into your shoes. And so with tall socks, it kind of prevents that. And then also you want longer shorts because you run through trees sometimes and the overgrown trails. So you don't want super short shorts because you'll tear up those really pretty legs. So from a gear standpoint, that's what I would start with for a rookie moving from road to trail is just a few gear tweaks. The other thing is your expectations. So when you go from road to trail, you have really got to pay attention to not pushing the pace and not pushing yourself until you kind of get your trail legs. It is a different motion. It's a different mental engagement because you're not in road running. You can put your head down and just watch your feet the whole time when you get tired.
In trail running, it's not just, you can't look down, straight down at your feet, or you'll be reacting too late. So really what it becomes a game of is looking out ahead and kind of planning where you're going to go and where your feet are going to land ahead of time. And so that's why it's a fun, different mental challenge, because you're mentally engaging what your course is going to be. So, for example, there's one section of the race we lovingly refer to as the rock garden, and it's a good section where you go in with expectations where you know this section is going to take me a lot longer than what 3 miles would typically take me, because it's really a lot of boulders, and none of the boulders are similar size. So you're not going to really be able to run through it because you can't get a stride. So you have to shift your expectations to, okay, I've got to slow down. I've got to really pay attention to my foot placement, because I don't want to step the wrong way, twist an ankle, go down, which falling, everybody falls. Pretty much every race I do, some form of fashion I fall. It's just part of trail racing. But so I guess prepare yourself to fall. That would be also another thing. But dial back those expectations of, you're not going to run as fast on a trail as you do on a road. So tweak the gear a little bit, and then tweak those expectations to slow down and be in it for the long haul rather than quick and fast.
If I were to ask you what is, and I know what you'll probably say here, but if there's something, because there are a lot of fears, there's a lot of things that kind of running through my mind that, I'd be afraid of out there. What do I really need to be most afraid of coming down to run the Georgia Jewel?
Not drinking enough and making a silly decision and not doing what you need nutrition-wise to take care of your body in the heat. So let's just talk about what some common fears are, and then we'll get back to the hydration part. You may see a snake on the trail. It's very doubtful. And if you do, this is typically what happens. 2 summers ago, I ran this race called the Barkley Fall Classic, and I ran up on a rattlesnake, and he was super not happy in the middle of the trail, shaking his tail at me. And so I stopped, and I walked really far around him in the woods and past him and kept running. That's the only time I think I've run up on a snake in my years of running. So snakes, and with so many people running, we'll have over 300 people on the trail that day. Most of them will get out of the way. So don't worry about snakes. Occasional spiders, that's my thing. I don't like spiders, but the great thing about being what I call a mid to back of the packer is that all the fast people take out the spider webs first, so you don't have to worry about those. It's really awesome.
The whole rattlesnake thing, I hope that doesn't scare Nicole off, but I do have to ask, I'm obligated to ask, because she said, if she mentioned bears, I'm out. So, no bears. No bears. They typically don't come that far north. No, they'll be down more in the eastern, southeastern, kind of southeastern. Yes, no bears. Yay, bears. Nicole, no bears. We're good. Now, that whole rattlesnake thing may take some getting over, but I may edit that out.
Yeah, that's Franklin's thing. Franklin cannot handle snakes, and so he's pretty funny about all that. Well, and really, this is so off topic, but when I ran into that rattlesnake, there was a guy running with me from the Netherlands, and he, I'm not kidding, just started running into the snake and turns and looks back at me and says, "What do I do?" And I grabbed him by the hydration pack and just yanked him. He fell back. He fell down to the ground. And I said, "I don't know what you do over there, but where I come from, we run around them."
So wildlife, we don't need to worry too much about snakes. Bears are out, spiders, but we're going to be slow enough that somebody's going to take care of the spiders for us. So we're
exactly
good.
Right.
All right.
You're totally good. But really, the biggest thing that I would say hurts people in the Georgia Jewel is not drinking enough. So it is typically it's been really hot the past 2 years. I mean, in the 80s, and the humidity has been really high. And so humidity is actually, for me, worse than heat.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
it just sucks the moisture out of you. And so we have people who, when their races go awry, it's usually from not drinking well enough. I mean, we only have, like, I think our furthest spot is six miles in between aid stations. So you will just really want to work on paying attention to taking in fluids. So as it starts to get warmer in your training, make sure you're forcing yourself to drink so that your body is getting used to taking in consistently fluids. Do you run, like, do you run with a handheld? Like, what do you typically run with when you're doing longer distances?
Yeah, usually something handheld, or go out and set water out ahead of time where I know I'll be able to pick it up.
Okay. One of the things, getting back to trail versus road, one of the things that you're going to probably want to look at is a hydration vest. There's a bunch of them out there. Solomon makes good ones. Nathan makes good ones. But having a vest on where you've got water, you can carry more than just your little, 12 ounces in your handheld, is going to be important. Also, it keeps your hands free. So Franklin one year ran a race, and he had one of the handhelds, and he fell on the trail, and he fell on his handheld, and it actually probably prevented further damage, but he broke his rib with it because he went down so hard.
Oh my goodness.
It was between his ribs and the ground. Anyways.
And the marriage survived you finding that so funny.
It did. Well, I always ask, our rule in our family is you have to ask first if the other person's okay. If they are okay, then you're allowed to laugh.
I think that's a good rule.
We always ask, are you okay? So you're going to want to probably look into running with a hydration vest. It also will allow you to put any kind of food in it that you're going to want, because eating, every half an hour is pretty important. And so ultras, like when you're running 35 miles, even though 9 miles more than your marathon does not seem like that much further, it's not the mileage at that point. It's going to be the time on your feet. So, think about how long it takes you to run 9 miles, and, then add on probably another minute to 2 minutes per mile because of where you are, distance-wise. So you're going to need to be eating out there more frequently, and it's going to be taking you longer to go that distance. So you won't be hitting aid as often, so you'll need to carry some nutrition with you. So getting used to that vest will be important for you. Plus, to know what you do want, what you don't want. A lot of the vests, they've gone to a flask system now. So they'll have these, they look like little bottles, and, they're 12 to 16 ounces. And so a lot of people will carry water in one and then an electrolyte drink in the other. Because sometimes you just get tired of the sugary drinks. And I know for me, I just want water. So a lot of times I'll just put water in one. Or pickle juice even. I love pickle juice. And so I put pickle juice in a flask and water in another flask. But that's an important piece of gear that you'll want to look at too.
Let me quickly clear up one myth for you. 9 extra miles sounds like a whole lot farther to me than a marathon. So don't downplay the extra 9 miles for me. When you said that, I about fell out of my chair. I know it doesn't sound that much further. You're out of your mind. It's like, no, I tell people that all the time because I'm a slow marathon runner. Like tomorrow, you and I were talking ahead of time, I'm going to go out and run my furthest run ever, 27 miles for my birthday. The 27 miles is not intimidating for me. The fact that I'm going to be on my feet running for 6 hours tomorrow, that's the hard piece. So when folks bring up the distance, at least for me, it's like, no, the distance isn't nearly as intimidating as, oh my God, I'm going to start at 6 and I'm going to be done at noon. It's like a full work day. That's the bear. And so how long, 35 miles, what is sort of the average mid-pack time to run Georgia Jewel?
I'm not going to tell you because it does not matter to you.
It does not matter.
No, listen, let me tell you. I will be out there from 5 a.m. Saturday morning until 1 p.m. on Sunday. So you and Nicole have from 5 a.m. on Saturday to 1 p.m. on Sunday to go 35 miles. Now, Franklin and I prefer people to run it within 17 hours. So as long as you are making, we actually say 12 hours, but we've got to be out there for the other distances. So as long as people are making forward progress and they're healthy and they're doing okay, we let people finish. That's one of the things about our race is that's why I'm so glad you guys are making it your first. I love our race to be kind of the inaugural race ultra run for people, because I remember my first, so I was sharing this with another guy this morning. My first ultra run was in Germantown, Ohio. It was a Germantown 50K, and I knew nothing. Oh my goodness, I was clueless. And I ate like white bread and pretzels, and Franklin and I had these salt tabs that like we put in our pockets of our shorts, which yes, running shorts had pockets back then, and they like busted with our sweat and got all over the place. Like we were just so dumb. We didn't know anything. And but I just remember how impactful those volunteers and the race director were in being encouraging and making it okay that we didn't know anything. And so I want the Georgia Jewel to be a safe space for people to come and challenge themselves and not know anything. And we will celebrate success and we celebrate failure because both of them are important and both of them have value. So the time doesn't matter. You have plenty of time to finish. And yes, you have plenty of time to finish. So don't even think about that.
So tell me, what's the most rewarding thing that you have seen there at the Georgia Jewel, or the most rewarding things, just the stories that make you glad you said, I want to be this race director. Clearly God put that on your heart, or God threw you into it without letting you think about it. But it seems to be something you really love doing. Why is that?
When you put yourself in an environment where you physically are stripped of control and strength, you're able, conversations happen that are a lot more vulnerable and authentic. And I enjoy being in moments like that with people where we're having genuine, authentic conversations. I enjoy being on the trail with people. I mean, we have business CEOs. I mean, we have people who work on the show Survivor. We have people who are business partners with some famous country singer that I don't know of very well, but is very popular, named Zach Brown. Like, we have really successful people that come run, and you get on the trail, and they're just your trail friends. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account when you're on the trail. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. It doesn't matter what kind of house you live in. Everybody is equal on the trail, and everybody is honest on the trail. And so having the opportunity to be in relationship with people like that, where we're having these genuine conversations and a genuine experience, gives me the chance to love people differently than the world loves them, and allows me to know them in a different way than the world would ever want to know them, in an environment that is conducive to being open and honest. And so people leave the weekend, and I always say I want people to feel like they've been to my home at the finish line. Like, I want them to feel like they're sitting around my kitchen table being served and taken care of when they cross that finish line. And then when people leave, I want them to say, there's something different about the Georgia Jewel and Team Baker. And what is it? What is different about them? And it's that verse in the Bible that talks about taste and see that the Lord is good. We want to give people a taste of genuine God love so that there's something that they come back for out of curiosity and because it's a love that maybe they've never experienced any other place in their life. So I think my favorite thing about the Jewel is people coming back the next year, and not because they think the course is great or, there are plenty of other races here in, the area that are as beautiful as our race and maybe even more beautiful than our race. But people come back to see us every year because they feel loved and known and valued. And so when somebody comes back to me, that's one of the most rewarding things about race directing.
That is beautiful. No, and so I've already told, Nicole and I have talked about this, that based on everything I've been reading, and then certainly now based on this conversation, I have a funny feeling when I get out there and run on those trails that I may never run off of them again. I just think there's a real risk that will draw me in. But that's a very scary deal because the Georgia Jewel also has the 50 mile and the 100 mile. And so that progression is a little bit scary for somebody who thinks they may fall in love with it and then be drawn to be one of those folks that comes back to you and looking to dare even greater. But I'm really looking forward to this, Jenny. I'm gonna, you've graciously agreed that we can kind of document this journey over the next several months. So you and I, hopefully we can talk once a month, and I'll start getting into some of the training and bring up some different things, more technical. Maybe you can help. But this is going to be fun. You're beautiful to talk with. I just love your spirit, and I think there's no doubt in my mind I think we've picked the right first race, but I don't believe I picked it. I think we've really been drawn there. I think there's going to be a great story in this. I think it's going to be God's story. I don't know what he's got in mind, but there's no doubt. And so I'm fired up about it. I'm looking forward to it. I never thought that I would see the day. I just started running 4 years ago. Here I am talking with you, say I'm fired up to come run 35 miles up a mountain. It just blows my mind.
I am thankful that you and Nicole trust me enough to come and make this your first. I'm very humbled by that. I'm very thankful for that. So it's going to be fun. Oh, it's going to be fun.
It will be good. Well, hey, thank you so much for the time tonight. I think we're both up way past our bedtime, so that's good that we did this. I think it demonstrates the commitment to getting us started on the right foot. But Jenny, thank you. I hope you have a great night, and we'll be talking soon and often.
Yes. All right. You too, Keith. Talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jenny Baker. Like I said, she is a treat. I am really excited about doing this series with her between now and leading up to that late September Georgia Jewel. So just a lot of information there. Very sort of a broad overview of what I'll be getting into. And then as we progress through the spring and summer, I'm sure we will talk more about some of the technical aspects of ultra racing, some of the training struggles that I am sure to be having, and just a lot of the other details of this ultra marathon sport. And, just listening to her, you can hear it's a lot different from the road racing that I have been doing. I've not stepped foot out on the trail yet to run, although my family, we just were out hiking a bit today, did about 3 miles on a local trail. And I start seeing trails a lot differently now as I know that I'm going to be running 35 miles of them. It's a little bit different than just going out for a Sunday hike. So I look forward to getting into the running of it. And, just the community, the running community is always awesome. So it'll be interesting to see how the ultra community differs from the road racing community, if at all. Maybe it'll just be the same sort of deal. But I look forward to it, and I am excited. My friend, like I said, Nicole, who is running this with me, she was absolutely adamant that if Jenny Baker mentioned bears, she was out. And I really don't want to be stuck running that mountain race by myself, so I'm glad to hear there are no bears, maybe a snake, but other than that, I think we are cool with the wildlife. So really fired up, too, about this idea of eating the whole way. That gets me intrigued. So I am grateful for you listening along. I hope you'll follow this road to the Georgia Jewel. My friend Nicole and I have been calling it actually Planet Jewel, the Planet Jewel, since it's sort of outer worldly in terms of anything we've ever done, any race at least that we've ever done. So we affectionately call this our trip to Planet Jewel. So Georgia Jewel, Planet Jewel. We'll see. We'll see when we get there if it looks more like Georgia or looks more like another planet. My guess is another planet. But thanks for coming in, listening today. I hope you all have a great week. Get out there and run wherever it is that you're going to run. It's that time of the year, lots of big races. Almost every weekend now I'm seeing folks fill up my Facebook feed with great race results from the weekend. So I love following that. So get out there and run hard and encourage somebody to run if you're not much into running yourself or taking a break from it. And if running's just not your thing at all, then I am extra happy that you are here today. There is always something for the non-runners. Jenny Baker is just a great example, so I'm glad you got to hear her. Check out Jenny's book, The War on Normal. It's a great book, especially for women who are trying to fight off some of this perceptions out there of what a woman should look like, especially post-pregnancy. So Jenny has put together a great book. Check out her She Ventures. Go to Facebook and just search for She Ventures. I believe they have a website too. I'll try to connect that link when I put some information about this podcast. Anyhow, you all have a great week. Look forward to talking to you again next week with another exciting interview and conversation in this running world. You all have a great day.
Despite the